Intercultural communication. It's something that we didn't really study here in the States until we realized that things went very wrong when we didn't know what we were talking about overseas, or just across the border here. There are a number of very famous intercultural communication faux pas that where American companies, without actually knowing or understanding the language, the culture, the colloquialisms of another culture, tried to take their business into another country and failed miserably. One of the first examples I can give you is Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay, Kentucky Fried Chicken, finger looking good. We've had that here in the United States for decades. Well, when they first tried to move to China, they translated the phrase finger licking good literally, except what it translated to there was Kentucky Fried Chicken, bite your fingers off. So that was a flop. Another instance in which things failed in China was when Coca-Cola went over. Instead of trying to find another pretty nonsensical word, or just calling it Coca-Cola, they tried to match it to Chinese caricatures, those that sounded best, or most like Coca-Cola, so they translate it as Kikukole, which literally means bite the wax tadpole. So as you can imagine, a drink with a slogan that was called Bite the Wax Tadpole didn't go over so well. Another failure, Got Milk in Mexico. It was translated literally. So once again, it didn't get the message across it wanted to, because the way it was translated asked the question, are you lactating? Chile, Colgate. Colgate toothpaste still to this day is sold in Chile, but not very well, because Colgate is a slang derivation of go hang yourself. Chevy Nova in South America, that's another failure. Okay, Nova in Spanish means no go. So Chevy doesn't run. That was not a brand anyone wanted. But that automobile failure comes only second to the failure of the Ford Pinto in Brazil, where Pinto means little penis. And as it turns out, no one in Brazil wanted to buy a car called a little penis. So intercultural communication flops. We've got plenty of them, and because of that, scholars have started studying what are the norms and regulations for intercultural communication. So very briefly, here are some rules to follow. When you are going to be communicating with someone from another culture, particularly if you're going to be doing business with them, there are some key intercultural differences. First, are you dealing with someone in an individualistic or collectivist culture? Individualism is high on my own goals, my success, being the star, whilst collectivist cultures are very team-oriented. So when you go in to do business, know whether you're supposed to be fighting on your own or whether that's going to be offensive, because it's all about the team and the goodness of the whole. Know about time orientation. We're very time sensitive in the United States. When a meeting's supposed to start at noon, everyone should be there 10 minutes early, because being late is offensive, it's insulting. However, there are a number of cultures that aren't time sensitive, because the interpersonal relationships, that rapport building, is so much more important that you would be expected to stop and chat with a friend in the hallway on the way to the meeting. If you show up an hour or two late, that's understandable. In fact, a meeting scheduled at noon may realistically not be expected to actually get going until 1 or 2 o'clock. Something you need to know. Power distances. Okay, we have different cultures have different variations of power distances. For example, in the United States, our power distances are kind of mid-grade, because there are situations in which you get to be on a first-name basis with your supervisor, your teacher, your religious leader. These things happen. In other cultures, particularly in Eastern cultures, this doesn't happen. When I was in the PhD program, I had some friends from Korea start with me, and they had to get themselves out of the habit of standing up whenever the teacher walked into the room, because they had spent their first, undergrad plus grad school, and they'd spent about their first 20 years in school having to stand up at attention at the presence of a teacher, a bearer of knowledge, because there were extreme power distances. Okay? This plays into other things. We'll talk about nonverbal behaviors later, but this is the reason that eye contact is very important, because it is an assertiveness in some cultures. Well, assertiveness in general, but it is assertiveness that says we are on the same level. And sometimes you don't want to do that because you could be offensive. Okay? Uncertainty avoidance. How much privacy are people supposed to have? How appropriate is it for you to pry? Formality. We've talked about the rules in the organization. You don't break the rules until the person directly in power over you allows you to change the rules. But there's different levels of formality in each culture. What's formal here is completely informal in some cultures, and what's formal here is also scary formal in other cultures. You need to know these things going in. Materialism. Okay, what are you expected to do in terms of physical objects? There are some places where you would not, as a guest, show up for a meeting without providing a gift. Okay? And context sensitivity. Where is it appropriate to conduct business? Where is it not? Is it appropriate to bring up business over lunch? Is it appropriate to only bring it up in the office? Or is it inappropriate to ever bring it up until your host begins? Because really, you just spend a couple days getting to know each other. Otherwise, it's just crazy. There's a book called Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands. And it's a bit of a pop culture book, but this book was written as a guide for business professionals, and it's actually quite good. What it does is it's a resource book. It breaks down almost every country, and in alphabetical order. It gives you factoids on the country, things you should know. It gives you a bit of the background, the culture, the language, and most importantly, practical tips for conducting business. Going down this list of 7 cultural references, what do you need to know? What's different? What's the same? How do you need to practice? So if you ever intend to practice business in a foreign country, or just as important, host someone from another country coming in to do business here, these are good things to know. Know what the other person expects, because if you anticipate and are willing to cater to their expectations and needs, you're going to be perceived as more effective, more understanding. These will only result in positive business outcomes. And the general rules of thumb to follow, whether you are very aware of what you're doing or you're uncomfortable, is be respectful. Be as respectful as you possibly know how to be, preferably with their cultural norms, but at least with your own. That way they can look it up and figure out what you were trying to do later. Be formal. Okay? When you don't know what the norms are, the more formal you are, the more safe you're going to play it. They can always bring you down if they want you to be less formal, but it's a lot more awkward to try to build someone up and say, no, sorry, you actually need to address me by my title. So play it safe. Don't put the other person off. Also, be clear. There is nothing in the world wrong with saying, I would like to do this because, or I would need to ask the question because. Again, it's all about playing it safe. The more comfortable another person is in communicating with you, the more effective you can be. The better you will conduct business, and the more successful you will be overall. So there's your 2